Okay, so in order to talk about pen gradations, I first have to review gradation. So a gradation is whenever something starts out dark and it kind of fades lighter and lighter. Sometimes they start out dark on the outside edge and they fade lighter towards the center, or sometimes it's dark on the one side and fades lighter on the other side. But pen gradations are a little bit more complicated than doing them with like colored pencil or crayon. With a colored pencil or crayon, you can kind of lighten your pressure and it'll actually lighten the color for you. With pen gradations, though, and marker, I mean, I pretty much, even if I lighten my pressure, I might get a skinnier line, but the line quality is always going to kind of be the same, okay? So it makes gradations a little bit more complicated. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about the 4 different kinds of pen gradations. There's hatching, cross-hatching, scribble, and stippling, okay? So hatching is when you just use straight lines, all right? Where there's a lot of straight lines, things will look kind of dark, all right? As you move along, though, you can have the straight lines get a little bit farther apart, okay? And as you go along, even farther and even farther. So in this area where there's only 4 lines, it looks pretty light, okay? Over here where the lines are closer together, it looks darker, all right? So if I was going to like shade this egg using hatching, I would go in and I would do like a series of straight lines where I wanted the egg to be dark. And then I would have there be less lines in the areas where I wanted them to be lighter. So this is kind of like my medium zone, and it's fading out into my light zone or my white area, okay? So you can see how it kind of fades over that way. Maybe I want to create like a gray area over here. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Where I have a lot of lines going on though, where they're really, really close together, you're getting a much darker value, okay? Same thing goes like in the shadow down here. If I wanted to go in and like put a lot of straight lines here, and then as I go further out into this shadow, my lines are gonna be a little bit less and a little bit farther apart. Kind of like that. Okay, so it gets lighter as it goes over, okay? So that's a way you can do shading with pen or with marker. The second way is cross-hatching. So with cross-hatching, I'm going to do lines in one direction, exactly like I did with hatching. However, what's going to start to happen is after I get done going over it with lines in one direction, I'm going to come back and do lines in another direction, which will be my cross-hatching. So they're just kind of making like a cross. You can cross these lines like on a diagonal. You can cross them perpendicularly, okay? All right, so I'm going to go in, I'm going to cross over these guys with another line going this direction. Cross-hatching is really nice because you have that second level of lines. You can kind of create more levels of grayness. You know what I'm saying? It becomes a little bit easier to see that gradation kind of fade out. And by the way, make sure that is the key with the gradation, that it fades as you go over, okay? So I can actually take the hatching that I've already done and I can transform it into cross-hatching, okay? Also in cross-hatching, you can have lines that kind of curve a little bit. So right now I'm doing an egg, which is a rounded form. So I could go in and do like my hatching lines a little bit curved, which will sort of help emphasize that look. Okay, if I want to do some cross-hatching in the shadow, I can bring some lines that crisscross here. There's a lot of kinds of art where they use a lot of this cross-hatching. In Tim Burton movies, like when they make the sets for those stop-motion movies, they literally do cross-hatching on things just to give them texture so that when the light hits it, it like absorbs into those textures and things. All right, next kind is stippling, all right? Stippling is probably the hardest. It's also the one that we're gonna use on our stained glass project if you're doing that one. So with stippling, it's all with tiny dots, okay? So with a marker or with a pen, what you're gonna do is in the dark area, you're gonna have a lot of dots that are really close together. Now, I'm not gonna do a band quite as big as those guys, okay? It's gonna be a little bit smaller, but where my dots are close, it's gonna create almost like a solid color of red. Okay, as I move along, I'm gonna get these colors, or these dots a little bit farther apart. Like I said, this one takes a lot longer. I'm gonna try to not do quite as much so I'm not up here for 25 minutes trying to do this band. Maybe you can kind of see it getting lighter. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in maybe on this one too. Okay, so we can see that it's kind of fading out from there. I'll zoom in just a little bit so you guys can see that closer up. But that's pretty much it for stippling. It's just all with dots, okay? It's really nice because it's a way to have a lot of control and make a really sort of detailed shadow. Again, I'm not going to show you that on the egg because that would take a really long time as well. Okay, the last kind is scribbling. With scribbling lines, you're going to make lines that kind of look like this. Like almost look like a graffiti word or something, okay? There's actually kind of like two ways you can do scribble. You could do lines like that, or you could do lines like this for scribble, okay? So I'm going to do both. My first one is the one I really like, which are these like crazy lines that kind of overlap one another. Now, as you can see, I'm making really large areas, so I'd probably want to use this on a little bit of a bigger drawing. If you have a really small drawing and you're trying to like get that feel of like that fade out in the scribble line, it's going to be harder to do, okay? It also makes her like a little bit more haphazard of a shading, which is cool sometimes, not cool other times. All right, the other kind of hatching is scribbling, is you could do like this with sort of like loopy scribbles. And again, as those loopy loops get a little bit wider, a little bit less there, or not as many of them, I mean, then it looks a little bit lighter, okay? So that's everything you need to know about pen gradations.